Hi, I'm Jeff Sikarsky,
And I'm Jason Primrose.
and welcome to Gentlemen, the #1 podcast for open-hearted leadership.
Woo!
Hi guys, good to be with you.
Because we're always honest on this podcast, I am not in the best space of my life. I'm like taking in everything that's showing up in my life right now, and I'm like, I'm gonna be angry. I'm gonna be fucking pissed about it, right? Like I'm just gonna be with the mad. Because I'm just
Well, before we go about you, you're going to introduce.
we will. I just want to give people that. I just want to give people that, like, hey, because I don't want to pretend, that like nothing's wrong when something is wrong. So, or something's off. It's not wrong, but it's off. It's in the way.
Okay.
But.
Well, I want to hear about why
I'm
you're
super excited. That's not what this is about. Inclusivity, though. That's not what this episode's about. But I just wanted to clear it, right? But what is really exciting about today that makes all of that go away is that we get to talk to Bruce. And so Bruce has always been a change maker, Bruce Reynolds. And we met over 10 years ago. At my first LA job, I was a green little Virginia boy, like enamored by the LA lights. And Bruce was this red carpet personality at the events that the agency I worked at was hosting. So I was like, oh my God, he's so cool. And I would love to be like anywhere close to that cool. So here we are, actually 11 years later. And we get to talk to Bruce, so I'll let Bruce introduce himself.
Thank you. No, that's kind. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So, 11 years ago, it's flown by. So, I mean, my world is basically marketing and media. I used to work at the BBC in England. And then when I came to the States, I was over at ABC. And then I was also working as a international marketing director for a fashion and lifestyle firm as well, with different fashion brands and stuff, which many people didn't know at the time because, when you're kind of on TV, that's what people see and tend to know about you, and they don't know you may just have, another gig or another job going on, and I have an MBA as well. And so that's why I always had my hands in the business side of things. And Hollywood has been crazy. And I remember when we met, there was just a genuineness about you. You was not jaded. There was no agenda. You really just wanted to do the best for your clients and wanted to do the best for the people you interacted with and the talent, such as myself. And that really came across, which was why out the gate, I was like, whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do for sure. Because there's no kind of me having to kind of figure out who is this guy, like, what's he want from me, this and the other. You were just straight up, I'm just here to do good. And that was the energy that I got from you from day one. So I thank you for that. And many, many years have gone by, and it's been a ride. It's been a ride. As I said, marketing and media, is my world. And being a change agent is the core of who I am. So whatever room I'm in, I'm always wanting to bring change. So I started in business news at the BBC because in business news, there was nobody that looks like me. Yet, there were many people that looked like me that spent money in the economy. So I was like, well, we all spend money in the economy. So how do we democratize that information rather than just speaking to those people who work in the financial industry? So that was like one area where I just wanted to bring some change. And whether I'm working on a marketing campaign or a messaging strategy, or even when I was doing On the Red Carpet, I'm always about how do we bring inclusion into this and what does inclusion look like? And 9 times out of 10, I am usually the man of color or the only man of color in the space, but it is what it is. My only hope is somebody that was like me or is like me when I was a kid will see it and think, if he can do it, I can do it too, and that can be a bit of a door opener.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Even though it seems like there's a lot, obviously there's a very big expansion of like diversity and inclusion, and when it comes to media, when it comes to creativity and art and stuff like that. So especially from a visibility perspective. So I feel like we're moving toward a better place. and there's all kinds of other factors that play into that, like socioeconomics and colorism and things as well. But I want to talk more about who you are, like fundamentally. So you said you've always been a change agent, and when we ask our guests who they are, we take out all of the titles, like all the jobs and all of the things that we have and stuff like that.
Wait, you take the jobs
take the
out.
jobs
I wanted to talk
exactly.
about the social impact stuff, the impact space,
Exactly.
that I'm in and all of that. But you want to
got to take the jobs out.
Okay.
You got to take the jobs out. So when we ask who you are, it's who you are fundamentally. Like who what's at the core of who you are. So I'm curious to hear your answer.
Oh my gosh. The core of who I am. I would say the core of who I am really is being the change that I wish to see in the world, you know, and being a man and being raised with 4 sisters and my mother. I was definitely just aware of the different gender stereotypes, you know, and I was 6'4". No, sorry, 6'3". I was 6'3" from the age of like 14. So to be a 6'3" brown-skinned man at 14
in London,
there's a lot that comes with that.
I said in London.
Yeah. In London, England, and Nottingham, and there's a lot that just comes with that. And there was many different paths I could have gone down in terms of finding identity or my value system and things like that, because, you know, we're talking about George Floyd and all the rest of it, but obviously racism and discrimination is alive and well, and it definitely has been throughout my lifetime. And so it's a case of what does that look like, and how do I navigate through that? Do I affiliate with a gang? Do I take on more of a street approach to life? Do I, dare I say, get angry at the injustice that exists? Do I be this kind of macho guy because I'm a 6'3" black man type thing, because that's what society sometimes is projecting on me, and you know? Or do I come back to who am I, and what's at my core, and who am I going to choose to be in this earth suit, to use, I think it was Oprah's word, or somebody's words. Yeah, you know, in this earth suit that I've been putting, who am I going to be, and how am I going to operate in this space? Therefore, being the change that I wish to see in the world means I see women as equal. You know, I have complete respect and honor, and I think they're amazing. When it comes to homelessness, for example, it's a case of why, if I was homeless, would I want empathy, you know, understanding that it may be economic, it may be a mental issue that we're dealing with, it may be just a number of factor of things, that even just growing up and being rejected, and they didn't know the impact that would have on them psychologically, you know. So what does that look like? So being the change I was to see in the world means I was just kind of trying to operate as much as I can from a place of understanding, and wanted to put my feet in the shoes of the other.
Wow. It sounds like you're very inclusive.
Yeah. At least that's what I strive to do.
Yeah. That's cool. I'll let Jeff jump in.
And very quickly, Jeff, and just very quickly, in terms of exclusive, absolutely. So when I was 19, I was doing a bit of modeling, and I was out here in New York, and I did a video. It was a music video with Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics. I don't know if you know who they are, but it was Dave Stewart's first solo album. He did a music video called Hearts of Stone. And in that video, he's suspended on the wall as an art piece. And then you had all these different types of people walking around the gallery, like looking at this art piece. And he was an art piece. Bootsy Collins, who is James Brown's, you know, player, was one of the artists on the wall, and many others. And then the video was all these different people just looking around. So all these different models, artists, just funky, different looking people. You had trans in there, you had drag in there, you had just all of them. And this was like in the early 90s. So I'm on set, this 19-year-old with this kind of glamazon transsexual who, I won't share the name, but, let's just say it was, Gary by day, but, Jemima by night. You know what I mean? And, to the nines. I mean, Pose, the TV show, captures that whole era really well. And I'd never been exposed to that. But I'm on set and it's like, well, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so what are you about? What's your story? Versus not too quite sure about this. It's, who am I to either judge? Who am I to exclude? Who am I to, not get just to know you as a person? You know what I mean? As long as nobody's like killing somebody for no reason at all, then I'm open for a conversation. What are you going to say? So anyway, just to add some more meat to the bone, Jeff, the mic is yours.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing all that, Bruce. What I really get is that you had every opportunity to relate to yourself and what you wanted to create in the world from a totally disempowered place. You said, I think you mentioned, hey, I could look at this from, what does this look like to be angry? What does this like to be a martyr to myself or my own personal beliefs? What does this mean to put myself inside of, some other, stereotypes? And I think that, and I can quite honestly come from being a straight white man and say, like, some of those even thought processes were not even they didn't come up for me. And I think I had the luxury of not having to even consider that.
Right.
So I think there's that distinction that I think some people don't consider based on a person's individuality or own like socioeconomic position or something like that. But what I got is that what really made a difference for you is a couple things. One was that you actively chose something different, and that it wasn't just like a one and done scenario. Like, this was a constant, I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose, I'm going to create, I'm going to create, I'm going to create. And that created a sense of momentum that likely wasn't present at the beginning of that exercise. And then the second one was also just that in noticing how coming at things from a place of like wonder and appreciation and understanding left no room to really create dissonance between people. Like, it's like that sort of like melted away. You shared that story about being on the set and being in this very dynamic environment, which I would guess that anybody walking into would just be like, from a sensory standpoint, would be like overloaded with everything that's happening there, right? But getting to take that
absolutely.
in, like getting to take that in from appreciation, getting to take that in from love, getting to take that in from like curiosity, had the experience be very different for you.
Yes, I would absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So my ancestry, my parents are from Jamaica. They're both mixed. Those of you that don't know Jamaica, there's the motto called "Out of many, one people." That's like the slogan. And it's out of many, one people, because of all the different cultures that were there. You have Chinese, Indian, Afro descent, Black. The natives were there originally back in the day. Jewish. There's so many rich cultures there. And when my grandparents passed away, my mother took me there for the first time, and I was around 9 or 10, I think it was. So to get on a plane, leave England, and then like 8 or 9 hours later, I'm now in this tropical island where there's, Chinese people speaking Patois, which is the language there, and then the odd brown person speaking some Mandarin because they work in the Chinese shop or something. And seeing white Jamaicans, and seeing these whites, being born and raised in England, I'm used to hearing the Queen's English and things. So now to see these kind of white people speaking, yo man, what up? Why I said? It was just like, wow, it was just a head trip. You know what I mean? To hear these white people talking this Jamaican patois. And so I would think that was probably an experience that really did help shape my worldview, and to just accept people on merit of who they were as a person, and that I couldn't really pigeonhole anybody because I never knew what was going to come out of somebody's mouth or what accent may come out of their mouth, irrespective of their skin color or features. So I think that probably could have played a part in my this rather than this approach, which is why I think traveling is amazing and everybody should travel to different countries around the world. I'm an advocate for that.
I definitely hear how inclusivity. I think it's tied deeply to experience. It's like I've never been to Jamaica, so even I have an idea of like what Jamaica looks like, and I would go and now hearing that, like I would go there and see something completely beyond whatever I've been told it is or expected that it would be. And so I think like even you living in America, walking around, like people don't expect you to speak with the accent that you have. So people don't know that you're from London. And so there's all of these things. And then even when I go to London, people, I think I dress kind of European. That's just me.
Yeah,
so,
you do.
I don't think people can tell right off the bat that like I'm American necessarily. But then I would open my mouth and then they would be surprised that I don't speak, the Queen's English.
Correct.
So it's very interesting because I think about this idea. Well, I want to go back to the idea of inclusivity as it pertains to travel, because like I know that historically I didn't travel outside the country with my family ever. So the first time I traveled outside the country was actually by myself with a friend. And it was probably after I was like 30 something. So I imagine a world where like not a lot of Black people socioeconomically in America, some of them don't have the capacity to travel internationally. And then there's also other people in America that I think have the same limitation. So it's just like, America's very, I don't know the word, but it's probably not a great word to describe. Like, overall.
Let me help you out. So let me help you out. The thing is, when it comes to travel, we now have the beauty of the internet.
Yeah.
And most people, and I can completely appreciate the digital deserts, meaning those places where people don't have digital access or access to the internet and things. So I can appreciate that. But for the most part in America, many people have the access to internet. And you can travel online. You know what I mean? You can Google, what's happening in Jamaica. You know what I mean? What's the national dish of Jamaica? What's the national dish of Colombia? What's the national dish of Poland? Or what fashion trends are happening in Poland? Or what music do Polish people listen to? So there's many keywords that people can put in and then just put the country in there and then get at least an insight into that country, So and obviously with the pandemic now, that, if anything, has completely legitimized the whole digital experience of digital travel.
Yeah, definitely.
So there are many things that people can do to broaden their horizons without having to spend that much money or physically getting on a plane, to at least give them a frame of reference. I call it a frame of reference of the other people that live in this world. Very quickly, an analogy that I like to use is I see this whole planet as one big house, and the sky is as the roof, and each country and each city is just another room in the house. And I think when we see the whole world as just one big house, and that each country, each city is just another room, that just takes away that anxiety of doing this and doing that. It's like if you go into Thailand, you just go into another room. It's just another room in the house, and the house is called Planet Earth.
Yeah.
Pack a few bags, let's go take a look. And also, I think that can bring empathy, because now if there's a riot or a fire or a flood or whatever is going on in the room next door, you're going to go and help. Surely if you heard crying in the apartment next door or screams in the room next door or whatever, you'd go check it out and try and help. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that's the same thing we need to do. We should be doing with other countries and cities around the world, actually, when we hear the pleas and cries for help.
Yeah. I like that analogy a lot. Settled my spirit.
Cheers.
I want to talk about, speaking of digital travel, so I want to talk about this International Black Heritage Month.
Black Heritage
Yes.
Month?
So
Yes.
it's literally a perfect example of being able to digitally experience the history of black people around the world. So I
Absolutely.
would love to hear more about like how you arrived at this idea, like what you saw that kind of brought this so fully forward, and then we'll start there. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for wanting to speak about that. So, as I've said, being born in my skin, in my earth suit, so to speak, I've been exposed to a lot, and I've been on the receiving end of some things that aren't so nice,
Yeah.
personally and also professionally. And then, to your point earlier, here in America, when I speak, people don't necessarily think I'm Black British or British Black or whatever it is. So it's interesting to see people's reactions. And when I was doing the TV show in LA, I remember in one of the meetings it was said, "Oh, they'll get him on the coast of America, the east and the west coast, but in the middle, it's going to be insightful with respect to a brown skinned man speaking the Queen's English here in America." So anyway, so there's lots of different dynamics going on, right? And then we just have the brutality that's been taking place, and with George Floyd and things. And for me, it was a case of where am I going to put all of that energy? Where am I going to put all of that emotion? Just posting a blackout square on Blackout Tuesday on Instagram for me just wasn't enough for me. And actually, Jason, it's the first time I'm sharing this, but remember the quote that was going around about I'm a brown man, or I'm a black man, I'm a king, I don't tear down my brothers and sisters. I don't remember when that quote was going around, and then people were like nominating people to do things. Do you remember that? So I think so you did nominate me, and I didn't do it. And the reason why I didn't do it, I don't know if you didn't notice, you may have not noticed it, but the reason why I didn't do it is because I just wasn't in a place to do it. And what I mean by that is there was so much turmoil just going on around me, and in terms of and I know you said it and come from that in 1,000% authenticity, and you mean it. But there are other people that will do that post and they haven't got their brothers back. You know what I mean? They are unfortunately tearing others down. You know what I mean? And so for me, I was just like, I'm not getting in that space yet. I need to just figure out where I sit in all of this. So taking time out from all of that, from social media and things, while I just was like, where am I with all this going on with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and just all of it? And I was like, you know what? What I can offer up is a international point of view, and I would hope a cultural bridge building situation. And I think that's good for people to understand that when it comes to diversity, it's not just a broad sweep of one act can fix all, Case in point, in the news, it would say things like African Americans are traumatized by what they're seeing on TV, or African Americans are scared of what's going on. I'm a black man, right? I'm a black British man. I'm not really in the category of African American. So to use that language sounds quite exclusionary rather than inclusive, even amongst if we just said black people in America are traumatized, or blacks are traumatized, it's because it's all blacks, whether you're from the Caribbean, whether you're from Latin America, whether you're from America. If we're in this country, we are all traumatized and we are all experiencing this. So when we hear just the language, African Americans, yeah, of course, this is your homeland, African America's homeland, so they're going to be impacted by it. But I think we need to use more inclusive language, because there is power in unity at the end of the day. And the whole thing is, it affects all of us. Anyone with brown skin, black skin can get pulled over by the cops and whatever happens. It's not like they're going to target, that's an African American, we'll go for him. It could be a Jamaican, it could be a Bayesian, it could be an Afro-Peruvian, or a Afro-Mexican.
Yeah.
It's just the world we live in. So creating International Black Heritage and History Month was one way, I believe, that could bridge all these different worlds and all these different voices, and provide a space for everybody of color to really be heard and to be seen. And for those people who may be not from those cultural communities, come and learn and partake in what the Black experience is, and in all of it, when it comes to the history of the Afro diaspora and the continent of Africa, and Africa is a continent, for example, it's not a country, it's a continent with over 50 countries, Africa is a big place. There's a lot of dynamics going on, but when you hear about Africa, some people would just assume it's a country, unfortunately, where it's a continent. It'd be like referring to just Europe, and not distinguishing France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, Portugal. The list goes on, So I think there needs to be an education around that. And the traditional Black History Months, which are fantastic, our history as part of Afro diaspora is just one chapter of our whole journey. And I think having an international Black Heritage Month or International Black Heritage and History Month allows for all the chapters to be explored, and not just the chapter of history. You know what I mean? So exploring all of these chapters, we can look at the colonization, the activities of Portugal, for example, during colonization, and how Brazil has, the most people from the Afro diaspora outside of the continent of Africa. Many don't know that.
Yeah, like
the Spanish.
Brazil's like over 50% Black or something like that, right? It's like something insane.
Huge.
Yeah, and people don't know that.
But we hear about Gazelle. Exactly. We hear about Gazelle, the supermodel, you know what I mean, and Pele the footballer. But mostly we hear about, the beautiful, Brazilian models and things. So usually they're mixed or white, and you don't know that it's a black it's a black country. Facts are facts. There's nothing I can do about that. I didn't do it. But please just at least let people know the truth and the facts. And why is that important? Because all the games we've been telling, or all the truth we've been telling, or the truth we've been admitting or omitting, has led us to this place, and has led us to the world that we are currently living in. Do we really want more of the same? We have to do things different, because there's that saying, to do things the same and expect different outcomes is insanity. So we can either continue doing what we are doing, or we do things different, and dare I say radically different, to have radically different outcomes. So creating International Black Heritage and History Month, I go on the record and say I may drop the Black history part of it, just have it as International Black Heritage Month. We're still, me and my team are still, working out that and figuring out, but for now, we want to anchor it in the International Black Heritage and History Month, because the history is the foundation of it at the end of the day, but we understand from branding standpoint, communication standpoint, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, creating an International Black Heritage Month, is critical. And now is the time, because we need change. And it's something that will pay homage to the past, but also look to the future. Because I think it's so important that we look to the future, and we are future thinking, and we give homage and a platform for the future change makers, for the future movers and shakers, for the future innovators. Who are they? Where are you? And I think, again, Black History Month is amazing, but it may not make sense to have the whole, the future of things, because just in the words, Black history, right? So it's going to be more past focused rather than future. So creating the International Black Heritage and History Month allows now for a more future-based conversation and activities to take place.
Well, yeah, and Black History Month is an American concept to give a window to teach Black history, and it doesn't include anyone else in the world that's
right. And there is Black History Month in England, and there are other Black History Months in other places around the world, and there's also Black History Days. But again, they're very siloed. You know what I mean? It's very kind of what's happening there. Whereas I just believe we need to start bringing it all together and appreciating the beauty and broadening the narrative. Let's broaden the narrative and the narratives that are out there. So you are right that, Black History Month in America in February is very, African-American centric, and that's wonderful. But for me, being the global citizen that I consider myself, I want to hear about Ethiopian Jews, for example. I want to hear about Black Germans and Black Italians, Black French, Black Norwegians.
Yeah.
I want to learn about that. So that's and as I've shared this many others have said, oh my gosh, like, absolutely. So I'm excited.
Yeah. I really hear that inclusivity is taking a completely different turn, because it's really inclusivity from a level of like inclusivity within like a culture set, you know, like even the, it's interesting that you said that about the African American headline narrative, because there is what I believe to be a bit of a separatist mentality that wants to separate Black people from anything that they could identify with outside of, like, as if the American experience is all that there is, and that's not true. So I could definitely see how that language itself is limiting and actually serves to isolate communities inside of that idea, when there actually is something different that's available. And you really only learn that from like traveling, and I think like going outside of, I guess, what's given to you, you know, what's like fed through the news and the media and through education. Like, you would have to know that, like, there were I didn't know, like, you would have to know there were Ethiopian Jews, which I've learned recently, but especially around this, like,
did you learn that from me, or did you learn it before?
I was having a conversation about the idea of Jewish people benefiting from white privilege, and this was in Clubhouse. Okay. And it was an interesting conversation, because that in itself is exclusionary, because not all Jewish people are white passing. So there's then there became this whole host of like Jamaican Jewish people and Ethiopian Jewish people, and so yeah, so it was very, very cool. But yeah, I just think that you know, we always say this, but Black people are not a monolith. Like, there's so many like ranges of our experience, and so,
there's so many ranges.
And throughout history.
I mean, Black Peruvians. And just, you know, just the Black or Afro-Peruvians. I had no idea that. I know it's so funny, because when I was living in LA, I used to love going to the Peruvian restaurant and getting Peruvian food. And some friends were like, why are you so into Peruvian food? I was like, I don't know, we just love the flavors. And now I'm like, I guess because the flavors were very familiar, unbeknownst to me, in terms of some of the spices, I guess, that they were using and things, but it was just, I just didn't know, you know? And yeah, through doing this, you know, creating International Black Heritage and History Month, discovered, you know, Afro-Peruvians, and there's a huge population out there. And you mentioned something earlier about language that I really think is key as well, that I found. So, as I mentioned earlier, referring to Africa as the continent of Africa versus it just Africa, which makes it sound like it's just a one country. But even talking about the slave trade, and I was having a conversation and someone said we should call it trafficking, slave trafficking, actually. Because when you use the word trade, it makes it sound like there was such an agreement there. Because we trade goods and services, right? We trade goods and services. You know, you give me some money and I give you the iPhone, or I give you the, you know, the Gucci top, or whatever it is. It's a trade that's taking place. It's an exchange. Whereas with what took place with slavery, there wasn't a real exchange as such. Those people were trafficked. You know what I mean? They were trafficked. So if we start using the language slave, you know, instead of slave trade, but slave trafficking, I think that now opens up the opportunity for a different conversation to take place, because now there's a clear distinction that these people were taken against their will. And now you have a lot of displaced people in all parts of the world that are from that lineage. And so there needs to be more empathy in there and more understanding, and actually go educate yourself about the trafficking. And I also think it's really important today, because human trafficking and modern day slavery is at an all-time high today. You know what I mean? It's still happening today. And I think if there's anything that can be taken out from the slave trade / slave trafficking of yesteryears, is what can we apply today to eliminate it? Do you know what I mean? Because we have the narratives, we have the stories, we have the horror. So what can we do today regarding slavery and slave trafficking and modern day slavery, modern day trafficking today? Because we know it from all those years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really interesting hearing you guys talk about this. When I was writing this down, just noticing how subtle shifts in the narrative actually can create separation and absolve people from needing to take ownership over it. If you can actually separate the idea of like slavery and trafficking, then our focus can be on trafficking, and we can be like, oh, well, slavery happened in the past, it's not actually relevant. When in fact, if it becomes inclusionary and it's actually in one, then we can address the entire issue as a whole, which has forward moving consequences in a good way, healing consequences and change that will have it look differently going forward. But it actually has, to me, it feels like it has healing properties from a historical aspect as well. But the more that we create more versions of all of this type of stuff, keeps us from actually handling the issue on a bigger level. And I'm really getting that now, because I'm just even noticing so thank you both for sharing a lot of this. It's not my intention to have this be something that's educating to me, but I'm always listening to learn, because that's primarily what I feel is part of my responsibility to actually take on. But I'm hearing even in this, in the opportunity for me to notice how when I use non-inclusionary language, it's almost like sort of an admittance that something didn't happen or that it's not relevant today. And so, but that's a way that I can then not deal with something or take responsibility for how my part has played in that, which is not what I'm committed to in the slightest bit. But noticing even in the language how the little nuances does set it up that way for me and other people, I think, in general. So I just wanted to share that because I got that for myself, and it's something that I can actually even address taking on, and a lot of people can address taking on would be my assertion around it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Absolutely.
Gosh, I know. I mean, I just think about the idea of using that term, the transatlantic slave trade. And I remember when we first learned about that in school, and like when you call it trade, it does mean something different. It's almost like it was okay for the time. And that's what people keep that's what people keep trying to make work. That's what I feel. People keep trying to make work that it was okay because it was that time, and that it was like somehow justified by like a biblical thing, and like just like how the world worked in terms of like supremacy and hierarchy, and like this idea that like resources could be leveraged and people that weren't white didn't matter as much. Or didn't come from that Eurocentric culture, didn't matter as much, that they could be exploited. And so it's like this kind of like, oh, well, either I wasn't there, is like the common thing I hear. It wasn't me, and then also that, like it was in the past, like they did that it was the time. And it's like, well, yeah, but if you don't look at it, you can keep saying that like, well, then it's okay. Then Jim Crow was okay because it was like, we were just like, it was just the time, and that's how people thought back then. And it's like, no, the more you give excuses, then it continues, and now we can make excuses for that now. There's always going to be a reason. If you can come up with one, and that, I think it comes from not addressing the reality of like the fact that like what they did at that point was inhumane, and everything that's happened after that has been inhumane, including what's happening right now.
Absolutely. And I think if we use, the transatlantic slave trafficking system that took place, that now changes the whole dynamic of that conversation. Yeah. Because now what we're talking about, the traffickers, like, well, who was doing the trafficking? And, where are those statues? Oh, that's a statue of one of those traffickers. That's interesting. Yeah. How does that even sound? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, there's that monument to the blah, blah, blah trafficker. You know what I mean? I don't know, but for me, that just lands a bit uncomfortable. Yeah. So I think once we start changing the language around that, and I cannot take the credit for the language, the language change that I'm advocating. I was in a conversation with somebody else, and they mentioned it. I was like, absolutely, that makes yes, because when we start talking about the transatlantic slave trafficking that took place, I just think it has a completely different dynamic in that conversation.
Yeah. Something we like to do at the end of our episodes is we want to ask everyone what they're taking away from the conversation, to give like our audience like little nuggets. So I would like to start with you, Bruce. What do you feel like you're taking? Like, what do you feel like you're taking away from our conversation?
I'm taken away from our conversation. I'm taken away how needed the work that we are all doing is needed. That's what I'm taking away. What I'm taking away is how much this, so thank you for creating this podcast and this platform for people to, you know, either share stories or for you to learn from and vice versa. But I'm taking away how much all of this is really needed. And I'm taking away that there are good people in the world doing some good things despite all the odds and despite all that's been set up against them to not do good in the world. You know, people still are out there for you guys. So that's what I'm taking away from this.
That's beautiful.
Thank you so much. Jason, what about you?
I really love that the world as a house analogy. It completely shifted my thought process around like my experience as it relates to others. And so I don't know, it just has me look at the world differently from like, I mean, I'd love people, but to love people in a way that they're like family, like we're all living in a house together, is a completely different level of like, I don't know, nurturing, I think is the word. So I feel like I have a real opportunity to be nurturing and of real service to my housemates, which is awesome. I really love that. And I love the shift in language around just being aware. I'm always aware of language. I think narrative is important, and you can add words and take words away, and they mean completely different things. So I love the awareness around language as well. Yeah, it's great.
Well, it's no fair when you take the two that I was going to talk about. No, it gets me to look even in a different place. You know, I mean, I will honestly say I have some new learning, like being in this conversation very intentionally, you know, gave me access to noticing how the narrative plays out for me, but also how it plays out just in my relationships. You know, living in Tennessee, like I live in a red state, conversations around here are a lot different than I experience possibly saying, you know, when I'm up in New York or when I'm out in California. So getting to actually see that separation and acknowledge it and address it, I think is something that I'm continuing to gain speed in doing. So this gave me some more awareness that I can take specific action on. So I'm excited about that. And I do like the house analogy too, because what was great about that for me is I'm really growing into this, we are all one, we are all interconnected. You know, my judgment on somebody else in the presence is actually a reflection of me judging me. And so the healthiness of that, you know, but that's a very one-to-one relationship by relationship, experience by experience type of situation. And when I think about the house analogy, it's like I could pretend I'm living on one side of the house and I'm like, oh, well, the fire is in a room far enough. It's on the west wing, so it's not going to make it to me forever, but it's still going to make it to me. And so there's opportunities to insert myself or educate myself on a more regular and consistent basis as to keep the integrity of the house or keep the unification of the house actually intact from a more healthy place. So I think those are the two main things that I'm taking.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And I did a documentary, a short, like in art house documentary, so it wasn't distributed widely at all, called Equation of Change. And I put that analogy of the house in there. I'm going to actually put the documentary up on the website for International Black Heritage and History Month, actually. So, you know, go on there and you'll be able to watch it, and it puts more meat on the whole analogy as well. And I'll say that again, so people do check out the website International Black Heritage Month.
Nice. Yeah, I was just about to ask for that. I think that's very important. So
yeah.
And Bruce, where can people also find you and more about you in general?
Yeah, well, I mean, what would you like my email address?
Up to you.
I mean,
like
Twitter
handles,
go to the social security number.
Yeah. Sorry. So I am Bruce Reynolds on Instagram. So I am Bruce Reynolds. That's on Instagram, and then on Twitter, it's Bruce Reynolds GB for Great Britain. So Bruce Reynolds GB for Great Britain.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure. So that's where people can, hit me up on social and things like that. And I mean, get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bruce, I think we get to the end of these conversations and we always realize that these conversations could go forever. So thank you for being here with us. Thank you for bringing your wisdom. And I know that anybody that listens to this conversation is going to get something for themselves, which is really the intention behind us creating these conversations to begin with. So if you are listening, when you enjoyed this episode, one, we encourage you to listen to all of them because they all have really impactful conversations. And, if you found something for yourself, let us know. You can send us a message on Instagram. You can send us an email. You can follow the rest of these episodes on YouTube and actually see us with Bruce in video format. And you can find us anywhere by simply searching Gentlemen, the podcast. Gentlemen is 2 words. But we'd love to hear from you. So, if you did get something for us and you want to share it with us directly, you can also send it to us by email. You can send it to gentlementhepodcast@gmail.com. And stay tuned for amazing new episodes. We're going to keep going. We're wrapping up the first season here, starting the next one in July. Just super excited that we've actually gotten this far with it. That's a really cool celebration to be with too, because we were thinking on March 2nd, we're like, how are we gonna actually get this thing off the ground? And we did. So I think that's all I have to say to close out. But Bruce, it was really a pleasure to be on this side of the camera from you. And Jason, anything else before we wrap up?
No, but we have 2 more episodes left.
We do.
Yeah. And
then we'll be done with season 1.
And who do you have? Can you share, or are you keeping that secret?
Oh, no, that's a secret.
Double secret.
It's a big one, and it's very personal to us, so it'll be really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be really
Excellent.
cool.
I'm looking forward to hearing
Awesome.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. Excellent. Oh, my God, this was great.
Cheers, guys. This was brilliant. Thank you for the time.
Likewise.